You're listening to Rootbound, a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside.
This episode of Rootbound is once again brought to you by Spring. Should you bring a jacket or not? We'll never tell. Spring. It's cold for longer than you think.
In case you couldn't already tell by that simulated record scratch and the transition to the Spring Concerto from Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, this episode of Rootbound is going to be a little bit different. My name is Steve, by the way. Yes, this episode is special. We're not going to be talking about any specific plants in particular, but we're going to be talking about the concept of spring in general and how spring applies to plants. Also, spoiler alert, we're not going to have one guest, but three this time, but we'll get to that soon. In the meantime, I want to talk a little bit about this song, the Spring Concerto from Antonio Vivaldi. While I was getting this episode ready, I learned a fun fact, or maybe it's a dazzling detail, that when Vivaldi published these concertos, he included with each one a sonnet that illustrated the music. So he wrote a poem that described the music that we were hearing, and he included it for everyone who was going to come listen to the concertos in concert. And so it was kind of like he had the first liner notes, which is pretty cool. So before we move on to our guest segment today, I thought it'd be fun to read the Spring Sonnet from Antonio Vivaldi. Now, this is the translated version into English, so the original Italian has the traditional sonnet format. This will not, but I think it's still pretty cool anyway. Here it is. The Spring Sonnet by Antonio Vivaldi. Springtime is upon us. The birds celebrate her return with festive song, and murmuring streams are softly caressed by the breezes. Thunderstorms, those heralds of spring, roar, casting their dark mantle over heaven. Then they die away to silence, and the birds take up their charming songs once more. On the flower-strewn meadow, with leafy branches rustling overhead, the goatherd sleeps, his faithful dog beside him. Led by the festive sound of rustic bagpipes, nymphs and shepherds lightly dance beneath the brilliant canopy of spring. Welcome to a special episode of Rootbound. This is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to be talking about a specific plant. We're going to be talking about springtime, because it is springtime currently. And we're not going to just have one guest. We're going to have three guests. And so that's a very special episode. And we're just going to talk about spring. And so first I'm going to introduce I'll have the guests introduce themselves, which is also a little special because that normally happens at the end of the show. But since I thought there's four of us, it might be better to do it up front. But I'll do the introductions, and then you can say hi. I think that's better. So first up, we have my wife, Karla, who was on episode 3 of the podcast, talking about cilantro. Say hi.
Hello.
And then we have Anwesha, who was on episode 6 of the podcast, talking about mangroves.
Hello.
And also we have her husband, Sinchan, who's not been on the podcast yet, but he will be on an episode eventually.
Hey there.
Okay. So we are here. We're actually in a phenomenal location. I will post some pictures on the Instagram. It's hard to describe how unreal this is. We are looking at the Matterhorn. Like, we have a private view of the Matterhorn here in Switzerland. Does anyone want to comment on the view?
It's stunning. We're sitting actually right in front of the Matterhorn in a grassy patch. There's snow all around us, and it's really a great place to celebrate the, oncoming of spring.
I totally agree. Just one more clarification. We're in a little town called Riffelalp, and there's a hotel here that is closed. So literally we have this whole place to ourselves. It feels like we have a private resort. We just had a little picnic, and now we're recording the show. As far as spring goes, this is a really great example because we're kind of a little bit further down the mountain, but just behind us, there's snow on the ground. But in front of us, there's grass and starting to be a few little wildflowers. So we're kind of like right on the edge of spring, which is really neat. We also had a little squirrel who was trying to, ask nicely for some crumbs behind us, which was very cute. I'll post a picture of him or her on the Instagram as well. But before we get started about spring, I think we're each going to talk about spring and plants and our own little impressions or anecdotes, anything we have to say about spring or plants in spring. But first, Anwesha, do you have Seek on your phone?
I do.
Can you see what those little yellow flowers are there? Because I don't know what they are.
Sure.
We're the most colorful thing we're looking at now. We're seeing a lot of grass. Most of it is still brown, but there's a lot of these little yellow flowers, and I'm not sure what they are, and I'd be very curious. So if you remember episode 3, the episode with Karla, I talked about the Seek app, which uses machine learning models and machine vision to identify living things, and mostly plants. So we're going to get a good update here in just a second. Anwesha's down the hill, scanning a plant. Is it working? She says, you say colt's foot? She got to say it into the mic.
Yeah, it's called Colt's foot.
Oh,
like
cool.
COLT''S.
Can you view species on there? Tell us any other fun facts about the colt's foot that's there?
It's loading.
We have not very good internet
We
here.
don't have great reception out here, but I'll jump in when it
Okay,
loads.
cool.
But that is a species, so it's called that.
Yeah.
I
So
don't have the scientific name though.
yeah, waiting for the well, yeah. Just pop in when you have it. In the meantime, Karla, do you have any thoughts about plants and the springtime?
I do actually. Well, I actually like to see plants and flowers and everything in the springtime after the dreary gray of winter, because once it stops being like New Year and holidays, it's kind of just turns into this gray long period, and so getting that broken up with pops of color in the spring is always a welcome sight. Like the daffodils and tulips in DC where we live is always great. So I enjoy that very much.
Yeah, me too. It's always really cool. I mean, since we had our garden, whoever lived in our house before us planted a bunch of daffodils along our driveway, and so it was a surprise the first spring that the daffodils popped up, and I really like them. And I'm actually, as far as the scientific stuff that we can talk about this episode, there's some things that I'm really interested in. Oh, that was a very pretty bird sound. I don't know if you could hear that, but hello, little guy. Anyway, a little bird saying hello on top of a little fir tree, it looks like. But yeah, when it comes to daffodils, I'm really interested in these plants that store energy in the winter in a bulb or a root or a rhizome, and then they pop up in the springtime, and it's a really interesting thing to think about, like, what is really the plant? It's almost like the plant is more the bulb than it is the flower, right? Because the bulb is always there, but the flower and the leaves are only there for a short period of time. And I was trying to think, like, there's not really a human equivalent to that. It's kind of like if in the winter, like, your legs, all you had was legs. And then in the springtime, the rest of your body came out for a little bit. But it's a really interesting phenomenon, I think.
Well, I think the equivalent is in the winter, we just hole up at home. And then in the springtime, we finally exit the house.
Yeah, and it's also, like, they say that the bulbs, are storing the energy all winter, so we maybe store that in a little extra fat, and then
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, it's true, right? Even human beings have that we have like unspoken rules about, like, in the winter you have like warmer, fattier foods typically and less fresh produce because you're like storing it, sort of. And then in the spring and summer you tend to have, more fresh things. It's growing again, all that stuff. So we have our own seasonal patterns of behavior, I guess.
yeah, just getting some extra tubers, storing some extra tubers in my gut.
So, just given where we are, actually, one of the first times I actually considered spring as its own thing was here in Switzerland. And since we're in Switzerland, I just wanted to mention that because before, having lived in California and in Mexico City, I didn't really see the passing of seasons so much. Everything was just beautiful and sunny all the time, so I didn't really think of things like winter and spring and fall. And the first time I really experienced that was here in Switzerland when you and I lived here, Steve. That was it's nice to be talking about spring here.
Yeah, me too. I never I never really understood spring, actually. Like, I grew up in Texas and in Southern California, and I knew, like, you read about spring in your, like, school books and, like, watch spring in movies. But, you know, this idea of, like, all of a sudden everything comes to life and there's color everywhere, and it's this real, like, you know, rejuvenation, resurrection. There's somebody singing a song from the mountain up there.
I can't tell where it's coming from. It's echoing.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, I never really understood what spring was either till I moved here to Switzerland, because I grew up in Texas and Southern California, and yeah, it's the same kind of all year round, and I didn't really get this, like, giant pop of color when all the flowers come out, and it's this whole resurrection of the year, and it's, you know, it makes sense that they put Easter in that time of year because of this resurrection theme. But yeah, so now I really love spring, and I don't think I could live in a place that didn't really have that kind of spring anymore. Or at least I think I prefer to have the seasons and have the contrast.
I agree.
What about you two?
Yeah, I think I shared your experience in Texas of not having that sudden burst, right? You know, the winter wasn't really that cold growing up, and you'd have a long period before the summer of, like, you know, pretty good weather, but there wasn't that explosion. And ultimately, I guess it comes down to, in the winter, not everything was as dead, and in the summer, not everything was really jumping back to life that quickly. And, you know, going to school in Boston, I would, you know, suffer through the winter, and then when the summer would come around, we'd leave for, like, internships or go elsewhere. So I was just like, oh, you know, there's nothing called spring. It's a hoax. There's no pop of color. And I've always imagined spring to be this long season, multiple months of perfect weather and bloomingness and things of that nature. But, you know, being in Switzerland right now, I see that it is rather that transition. It does not have to be like a 3-month long transition. It could be overnight. And it's the pop rather than the existence of the flowers that I think define spring to me right now.
Yeah, I think it's a transitionary season. It's a season, yeah, that's a good point. What about you, Anwesha?
I mean, likewise, I grew up in a warm place as well, in Florida. So I did not see seasons until much later in life as well. But then later in college, and especially now, I came to appreciate it so much, because every single year, it feels like it'll never come. You know, it's always just like 1 week later than you think it will be. I don't know why that happens every year. And the other thing that's really interesting, I mean, Sinchan said it sort of happens overnight, and I think that's so cool too. Like, every year it feels like, was that flower there yesterday? You know, like, it's just like out of nowhere, it just all springs back to life. And I think there's some saying about, I think it's about going broke, actually. I think there's a saying that says it happens gradually and then all at once. Going broke. But I think spring also happens like that. It happens gradually and then all at once. Like, you sort of don't notice. You're still wearing your heavy coats and your scarves, and then one day you go outside and, like, this whole plant just came back out of nowhere. And there's flowers and ivy, and especially the trees. I like watching the bud break too, where it's like there's all these twigs and you think that they're dead, but then all of a sudden they're covered in leaves again, sort of overnight.
That was well said. Another thing maybe we could talk about then, you know, we talked about this concept of the roots and the bulbs that store the energy over the winter, and there's really cool plants like that. For example, one we've talked about on the show already is pokeweed does that. Pokeweed completely dies back in the winter and just stores its roots in the bulb. But another interesting, I think, springy thing that I didn't learn about until recently, there's a concept called cold stratification. Have you ever heard of that?
Nope.
And I just looked it up today because I realized I know what it means, but I didn't know why it was called that. So cold stratification is when a seed needs to be cold for a certain amount of time before it will actually germinate. So, like, there's certain plants that you could plant the seed in the ground, and if the seed never gets below a certain temperature, it will never germinate. And the stratification part apparently comes from when people discovered this and they started trying to germinate seeds on purpose. The first time they did it, they would like in a pot put a layer of soil and then a layer of seeds and a layer of soil and a layer of seeds, trying to simulate the regular system in the ground. And so it was a stratification of earth that they were laying down. So the word stratification doesn't actually have to do with like a method for germination, because there's other kinds of stratification that you can do it with like moisture, and I think you can some seeds need to be like abrased a little bit. They need to be like roughed up, and that is a kind of stratification. But the name comes from that first method where they were laying down layers of soil to try to simulate the way the seeds would be in the soil, and so it was stratified. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting that the seeds kind of have. I mean, there's probably some science about this, so if you know, look it up. But it is really interesting to think about, how do the seeds know that they need to be cold for a certain amount of time, right? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And the fact that they need the cold is just so funny, because like when you think of like what do living things need to grow, you think, oh, like heat and moisture, like being cold for a certain period of time certainly never kind of registers as a thing that's necessary for growth, but it is.
Yeah, I think it might even be a signal of like where they came from, because maybe for them to expect and wait for that time when it's just the right time to spring up, they need for the winter to be over. And if it's not cold, then they don't know that it's almost time to jump.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like if it never got cold, they wouldn't want to germinate because they think the cold will be here soon, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't want to risk germinating if you haven't been cold for a while first, because it's like the logic of a seed, which is really really interesting. Like what kind of like little programming is in there, you know, like that knows how to do that. I mean, the seed is like, you would think about seeds as being these like kind of like inanimate objects, right? But they're like a little computer program almost.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. In computer science, there's this concept of state machines, and you basically draw these diagrams where you have states, and then you say that it transitions from this state to that state using XYZ transition. And, learning that spring is a transition, we really have to think about, okay, what's the state before and what's the state after? And I guess different seeds have different definitions for that.
Yeah. That's true.
That's amazing.
Really good analogy.
By the way, I was able to load the information about the coltsfoot.
Oh, cool.
So not to change topics,
no, please.
But just briefly jumping in here. So it's called, the scientific name is Tussilago farfara. And it's related to a bunch of plants. It's on the podcast you've talked about the Asteraceae.
Asteraceae.
I remember you said it like
Asteraceae, I think.
a lot of times on the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to guess it was an Asteraceae because they kind of almost look like a little dandelion from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's in that family. It's related to sunflowers, daisies, and it says it's native to this area. So I think we can tell that because we've been seeing them all over. And they're native to Europe and parts of Western and Central Asia. The name Tussilago is derived from Latin tussis, which means cough, and ago, which means to cast or to act on. And so it was used in traditional medicine back in the day.
As a cough medicine?
I think so. It doesn't say that specifically, but I think so. But then that fell out of fashion because there was the discovery of a toxic alkaloid in the plant that caused some liver health concerns. So no longer used in that way, but it is very beautiful.
Yeah, it is very beautiful, and that's interesting that its Latin name actually has to do with its medicinal effect. That's pretty cool. Hello, colt's foot. I wonder why it's called colt's foot in English.
That's true.
Yeah, it doesn't really look like a colt's foot.
No.
But yeah, they're really cute. I mentioned in the previous episode, English ivy also used as a cough medicine, but also has some alkaloids where people are not really supposed to use it. But it is in some commercial cough medicines still. So I wonder if some of this stuff is as well. I wonder. Maybe someday we'll do a real episode about colt's foot, and we'll let you know.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Anyone else have any other stories about spring? Those are my two scientific things I want to talk about, which is cold stratification and like storing roots and tubers and rhizomes. But any other like anecdotes about spring or anything?
Yeah, one of the things that I learned here in Switzerland from when I lived here, I never verified this, but it sounds romantic, so I'm going to say it anyway. Um, is that certain flowers come up at certain temperatures. For example, like there's certain flowers that will come up at 5 degrees Celsius, and there's other flowers that will come up at 10 degrees Celsius, and so on. So it's just kind of and you do see flowers come up at different times. So I wonder if it has to do with the actual temperatures or the time, but it's really nice to get a variety of flowers, like just little flowers that are blue or white flowers first, and then little flowers that are yellow or orange or pink a little bit later. It's kind of fun to see the variety at different times.
Yeah, that's true. One thing that's really cool about going up the mountains on a train like this, as you go down, you kind of see the transition to spring actually happen in one day because of that gradation in temperature. Mm-hmm. And up at the top of the mountain, there's like no plants. But as you get down, there's more and more. And we're still up pretty high, so it's still a little bit like brown and stuff, except for the colt's foot. But as we went down the mountain, there's more and more flowers. And yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about, the plants know when to come out at their temperature or their environmental conditions.
Again, they're little computer programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think living in Brooklyn, I see that a lot where it's like it almost is a season for each flower, but the season is like 1 week long. But you'll get, all the daffodils all at once and then all the tulips all at once. And it's amazing because it's sort of like a secret underground garden that doesn't show up until, this certain time of year. But they're all there sort of waiting. And certain people have the most amazing gardens where I think they've planned it out that way. So like you'll see different shaped patches just sort of come up, or like they have shaped it in a triangle or a star or something. And so all the flowers, when they come out at that time from the bulbs, it's really amazing to see the different sort of like built-in landscaping. I mean, they did it once, but then it comes back every year, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, that is super cool. I wonder what it'd be like to explore that underground garden. Because that's something so hard for us to wrap our heads around, but the plants are just as alive underneath the ground as they are above the ground, but it's like a world that we can't really ever really see, which is, I think, pretty interesting. And it's it is a little garden down there. Pretty cool. Any other anecdotes about spring?
Not
That's
that I can
okay.
think of right
That's
now.
all right. Well, I think we maybe just need to transition to just enjoying this view that we have here, which I said I'll post some pictures of because it's phenomenal. And I hope you enjoyed our spring special episode here. And I'm thinking about doing special episodes per season. I think it's kind of a fun little way to mix things up. So if you enjoyed that, let me know. If not, you can also let me know, but I probably won't pay attention to it. We'll have a wonderful spring. Bye.
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 That was fun.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Early spring is one of the most exciting times of the year. As the days and nights warm up, the ice starts to move out of the rivers, and everything comes back to life. I hear a distant roar of avalanches, racing down the mountainside into a valley far below to join a glacier ice-filled river grinding its way to the sea. Snow in the mountains hangs on late into the spring and early summer. That's not a waterfall, but a small avalanche of ice. When spring is dancing in the mountains, the whole country comes back to life, and nature's wildflowers start to cover the landscape.
Okay, Steve's back here. We're all back here. I lied. The show's not over. Just to end the show is I have a little surprise here in my pocket, which is some Swiss whiskey. So here, open that one,
Nice.
Karla. Swiss whiskey made from local barley, distilled down in the valley and aged up on the top of the mountain. So we haven't talked about barley yet, but this is liquid barley in its best possible form. And if we've got 2 bottles, but we can open it up. Let's Let's do a little cheers, and then we can each share a little bottle and actually end the show here like this.
Cheers. Woo! Cheers.
Yeah. Take a drink. Yeah. I'm going to take a little drink myself. Good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Have a good spring, everybody.
In a high altitude environment.
Woo. My guests on this special spring episode of Rootbound were Karla Arias, my wife, who you can listen to more on episode 3 of the podcast, where she talks about cilantro. Anwesha Banerjee, who was on episode 6 of the podcast talking about mangroves. And Sinchan Banerjee, who hasn't talked about a plant on the podcast yet, but keep your eye out for that episode. It will be coming sooner than later. Rootbound is hosted by me, Steve Ellington. Music by Christian Krigaskota. Fake ads by David Lonnie. Rootbound is a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside, but if you can go outside, enjoy the spring.
Spring, it's cold for longer than you think.